This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
Hey everybody, it's Aaron Norris with the Norris Group, and today we are here with Dr. Jonathan Reichental. One of the most impactful comments that was made on our radio show last year actually came from a nonprofit that builds affordable housing. And he said, if there was ever a massive emergency in California, I wouldn't want to live along the coast. The reason being that all your first responders lived, an hour away because they could no longer afford to live along the coast. I'm like, And I know you appreciate that working in city government, specifically in California. Those conversations are being had, especially in the Silicon Valley. Somebody told me that the number of PIOs is going to be huge in the next year, and it's going to flush somewhere around $25 billion into the area. So perhaps there's really no end in sight of gentrification there because of the need for more workers. And it's going to be very interesting to follow in California.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. It's painful too. I mean, we can make this personal really quickly. I mean, I struggle with housing price costs here, and as do a big proportion of the state. We are not responding quick enough and well enough to massive demands for housing and affordable housing, and it has real repercussions for people's lives and quality of life. So I don't know how we get over that, how we turn the corner on this, but it's as of sort of early 2019, we're not in a good place.
So smart city needs to mean more than a few things that we're going to be talking about. We definitely need to fix the affordable housing issue, and California is such a unique case. We've been talking a lot about the 3D printing and the accessory dwelling unit conversation that's specifically happening in California right now, and I think we're going to have some interesting conversation this year because what the state is doing, and then 3D printed houses is going to, I think 2019 is going to be the year we finally start hearing about that, and it'll be interesting to watch. But let's talk about smart cities. In your opinion, what makes up a smart city?
I think it's one of the most popular questions I get, no matter where I go, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think, as you and I talked about previously, the definition is changing as the times change. I've always said that, a smart city is a city that is uniquely responding to its needs, and there's going to be certainly a significant component of technology in those responses. And the reason I kind of define it that way, more as a city's response to future needs, is because it answers another question, which is, what city in the world or what city is doing the right things? And I say that question can't be answered because it depends on the needs of a particular city. What's important to San Francisco is going to be different to Barcelona, to Moscow, to Melbourne, Australia, because it has to reflect needs in that community and the political environment and the infrastructure, and the terrain. There's so many other components.
Okay.
What we can say is, a cities, because they have become and will be the center of all human activity in the future, they have to be great places to live. And I think at its heart, the smart city is about creating a terrific quality of life. Right? And it's about creating places that are livable, workable, and sustainable. I think those are the three sort of major measurements of whether a community is working. We from my perspective, and many people who kind of operate in this space, smart does mean technology, but it also means good regulation. It also means good laws. It means engaged people who are willing to collaborate with each other and with their government. And so it is much like many of my answers. It is multidimensional. It's made up of many, many different things.
I sort of like that. I wasn't expecting you to sort of bring that local flavor in. I actually really like that. If you are a real estate investor looking for clues, and I would love your opinion on this because you've been inside city government, what are some of the things that you would look for to hint that the livability, workability, and sustainability issues were being handled at the local government level?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is defining of our times and will be even a greater focus in the months and years ahead is the degree of innovation. Is to what degree are we thinking differently about how we're doing stuff? Because let's look at two quick things. We have problems with our transportation systems, and we have problems with housing. If we continue to do what we've been doing for the last 40 years, you don't have to be that smart. You know that's not going to get us to a good place. Sadly, we see repetition. We see certain behaviors. Adding another lane to a highway does not solve transportation for the next 100 years.
No.
Although we still do it, right? And there's places where we have to do it. My view is you can't apply 20th century solutions for 21st century problems. And so don't add another lane if we don't have to. Let's think completely differently about how you move people around. And that's maybe this is great because this gets right back to the first thing I said on our talk today, which is people aren't thinking big enough and bold enough. That's what I'm talking about. And when it comes to things like, excuse me, sorry.
I was going to ask you, are there any cities that you sort of get really excited about seeing some of the things that they're doing in this space?
Well, on the transportation side, I mean, there's neat things being done in terms of, experimenting with Hyperloop and with Elon Musk's Boring company. Obviously early, clearly, not sure yet.
Yeah.
But there are communities in whether it's in the Middle East or in Scandinavia that are prepared to take a risk, try something. Even Los Angeles is going to get real bold on their ideas around transportation in the next few years. And so there is a scattering of communities doing interesting things. Many cities are embracing bicycles. They're embracing scooters now and alternative forms of transport. Even though Uber and Lyft and Grab have sort of contributed to the problem in the short term, in the long term, many of these companies have a vision that's very different for how transportation will be handled. And I mean, the storyline here is that there are new ideas and there are communities that are prepared to try things. And so trying is part of, innovation in the 21st century. Try things even though we're not sure that they're working on. I think on the real estate side, we see exactly the same dynamics. And you mentioned it in one of your questions and statements, which was we may see 3D printed houses coming. And so that's kind of interesting and bold and innovative.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Then you got your whole sort of little house movement, mini house movement. More density, I think, is something that lots of urban environments are looking at. And then building up. One of my criticisms for California, and particularly Northern California, is we don't want high rises. We don't want tall buildings. And earthquakes aside, because that obviously plays into it, and insufficient infrastructure in terms of roads and transportation systems. You solve some housing problems if you build high rises, and you look to Singapore and Hong Kong and other, like even the center of London and other communities where if you want to get lots of units and begin to stabilize housing prices, unfortunately you got to go to places you didn't want to go historically, but the future forces you to do that.
Yeah, and in California, unfortunately, a lot of the construction industry just takes so long and there's so much risk. I think the fear is that it's just so costly and that the builders will lose money. We've been covering that a lot lately. We're talking to the National Association of Home Builders, who said 25% of the cost of building is now regulation. And while some of it has its place, I think the biggest concern here in California is, the CEO of the California Builders Association, I think he was the one who said that in Florida, if you're a builder and you want to have a conversation about building a tract of homes, the question you have to ask yourself is, what will the economy be like in 1 year? And in California, the question a builder has to ask is, what will it be like in 15 years? So it's frustrating. It feels like we can't have an honest conversation about affordable housing because politics is getting in the way, and that's not sustainable. So I'm curious. I know you probably won't have the answer to this. It's just I don't know how we work ourselves out of that. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, it's good to recognize that. It's good to recognize that it is difficult and frustrating, and everybody has an important opinion and point of view on this. I think I see a couple of possible trends here. One is that gradually we're seeing a new generation of leaders be elected into office, and so you've got a new generation of kind of internet natives, people who were born with technology, people who understand technology, people who have a greater appreciation of where things are trending, are beginning to become the policymakers. Now it'll take time, but that's I think one trend which is positive. I think the second thing is in some ways we're going to be forced into making tough choices. There's a forcing mechanism here that people are demanding more choice, they're demanding a change, and they'll do that at the ballot box, and they'll do that through other sort of channels. And we have to recognize where our limitations exist today in terms of existing regulation and what can be done to streamline it, but do it in a way that makes most people comfortable and does reflect, for example, our concerns about the environment, our concerns about resources, and a tradition of being environmentally conscious in California. That we recognize that and work with it. So I'm not as I generally tend to be an optimist, but I'm a little bit more optimistic, in the long term, a bit more pessimistic in the short term.
Understood. And I think you're right. And movability has never been as easy as it is now either. So if people don't like living in California, they can move to other states and probably save money. So our state regulators and politicians are going to have to make some changes or else it'll be painful. So that's true. Let's get into the shared economy and how work is going to change. I think in your course, you talk a lot about there is a lot of fear when it comes to things like artificial intelligence combined with robotics and how that might get rid of a lot of jobs. And you brought up the very real facts that, in past revolutions, it's actually created completely new sectors. Are you afraid that things are moving so quickly that upskilling won't be able to keep up fast enough, where industries will completely disappear, and maybe it won't be that way this time?
No, it's an important question for all of us to think about and then act on. It's a little unclear. It's a little bit fuzzy. There's a whole school of argument that there'll be more jobs and more demand in the future, and then there's a pretty decent amount of arguments that we're going to struggle to find things to do, and there's going to be massive unemployment in the future. So that's what we're dealing with is good arguments on either side of this. And the reason why both are in many ways appropriate is we simply don't know. There is this kind of unpredictability. And each of us, I think, has to look at the data kind of and make our own minds up. I'm struggling a little bit with this one because I do think we are going to see massive change in the world of work in the decades ahead, greater than we're anticipating right now. That will have impact. Now, just like with everything else, it won't affect everyone equally. If you are a person who has traditionally done unskilled work, it could be that the impacts of automation and AI are going to be much greater than if you have very specialized, creative work, and you've had a significant amount of experience and education around it. So the impacts could be large and they could be unequally distributed. At the same time, to your point, there's going to be about 50% of the things that people will do in the future are jobs that don't even exist today. And so what will they be, and what kind of training should people have for them? Will we know? Will we understand those in a timely enough manner? I think those are there's some uncertainty to that. There's no doubt that there'll be new opportunities. The question is, will they be accessible to everybody, and what will it take to be good at them? One of the things that I talk about and write about in my course, The Foundations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is that the more specialized you are, and the more you have an education around a topic, the more likely you are to have more success. And that's important today, but it's going to be even more important in the future. So relying on lower skilled work in the future, I think is risky and will cause problems for people who simply, for whatever reason, can't get a highly skilled job. There's a whole ton of reasons why people can't do that, and what happens to those people. So those are some sort of big points. What we do have to recognize today, in both as individuals and enterprises, is that the world of work is going to be transformed and is being transformed as we speak. Let me just throw out one example and data point that people find it useful. Is already over 30% of the American economy are individual contributors. Right, that's sizable, and it's only going to grow in the years ahead. Historically, Americans belonged to an organization. They got a paycheck every 2 weeks. They were in a factory or in an office. And now the phenomenon is, no, people are participating in the gig economy, or they're starting their own businesses individually, and that in itself is changing, the working dynamics here in the U.S.
That's a huge number. I was curious to know, have you heard of? I know the government was having a hard time. I actually reached out to the Census Bureau and I was like, how are you guys measuring this? And I know they were bringing back something they retired in 2005. And I know the census is coming up. Because a lot of when you say 30%, are those individuals that participate in some way, shape, or form in sort of the gig economy? Or is that strictly 30% are working for themselves?
It's all of that.
Okay, so it's a mix.
It's the notion of an individual contributor. Just you don't belong to a traditional organization.
That's still a very high number, and it'll be fascinating to see if the census sort of puts some questions together on that and how they start measuring it. Because I always ask when I get into like an Uber or a Lyft, is this your full-time job? And I've only had, I don't have enough data points. It's, I'm sure my margin of error is huge, but only one Uber driver has said that it's their full-time gig.
Yeah.
So, and you brought up some really good points in your course about, the challenges there. Yes, it's freedom, it's flexibility, but it doesn't come with those safety nets like a retirement account and healthcare that we've typically been used to having, those kind of jobs that we used to have. But those are really changing quite a bit as well.
Yes, that's exactly right. The social safety net is going to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was always the business that provided those things to people. I also think that's going to put some pressure on alternatives, I shouldn't say alternative, but on pressure on the debate on healthcare in the United States.
Yeah.
By the way, because I think maybe your audience is broader than the U.S., I think it's important to recognize that many of these phenomena are global. These are not U.S.-centric.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, healthcare, there's been the debates, some cities wanting to try, at least this year it looks like it actually might happen, the idea of a minimum living wage for everybody in a city. That's an interesting phenomenon that might happen starting this year. I forget which city is going to try that.
The idea of the universal basic income?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
We've got about 4 minutes left. The one thing I wanted to say quickly, it's not just blue collar jobs that are sort of in the mix. It's white collar, it's engineers, it's attorneys, it's certainly real estate. I wanted to ask you specifically, in the real estate industry, there are a lot of Wall Street companies coming in the space looking to, we're intermediaries, we're the brokers in the middle, and the very nature of blockchain is sort of getting rid of the middleman. Any advice on maybe, I don't want to ask for predictions about our industry going away per se, but I think you may have already answered it, talking about being highly specialized and looking at maybe the value that we bring to the transaction. So we're not just considered an intermediary. How do you see maybe other industries addressing this very same topic?
Yeah, not well, not quickly enough. This brings us a little bit back potentially to the notion of blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
which, as a sort of distributed database platform, has the ability to displace traditional intermediaries and a whole range of transactions, whether it's mortgage brokers or any type of financial type activities, and many others, including those that overlap with the real estate industry. It's like things are evolving. There's unpredictability, so people aren't ready to fully commit to different paths. You have to sort of speculate on, if you're in a particular industry and you're seeing a technology that's looking like it might be disruptive, to what extent do you make huge change? And then what happens is the technology either burns down, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or takes things in a different direction. I guess that's why it's increasingly hard to be a business leader today, and will even be hard in the future, because you have to make more and more bets on things that are greater and greater, more greatly unpredictable. But I do think that there are industries that are not moving quickly enough to reflect shifts in change. I immediately think of physical retail, and for a long time we knew that Main Street was going to be challenged by online e-commerce, and you look at the sort of big stores in the United States, Sears and Circuit City, and these were significant players in retail in the United States for several decades. And just like everyone else, they knew that things were changing. I mean, we could see that, year over year, online commerce was getting bigger and bigger and pulling more and more away from, brick and mortar. And that eventually would become more difficult to sustain, real estate presence because of the cost and the shrinking, revenue. And yet you see these major retailers now going bankrupt almost weekly in the United States. Big brands that were around for a couple of hundred years, overnight are just shutting down. And you have to ask the question, well, what did they not learn, or what did they not see that others should see? And so if you're in retail today, particularly if you have a large brand and with a big footprint, you better be thinking about completely different models. Otherwise, the future doesn't look good. And so that to me is very characteristic of sort of like a changes that are right in front of us, and yet organizations are not necessarily moving as fast. I'll give you one other. There are some interesting experiments happening in this is getting back to the physical retail market again, in terms of automating checkout systems. You've had Amazon's sort of store where there's no staff. You go in, you get your products, and you leave, and it's automatically charged. Mm-hmm. We're going to see impacts to people who work in a retail job. In America, the largest employer of women are retail jobs, and many of those are going to go away. We can say that now with confidence. So we know that. What are we going to do about it? We know. By the way, we know the same thing for drivers too. Drivers is the single biggest category of employment for men in the United States, and we know driving is going to go away for the most part. And so, knowing this information, how are you going to act? And so, your question is a good one. There is change in front of our eyes that possibly we're not taking the right action, knowing that it's also complicated and unpredictable.
So how do you stay on top of all this stuff? I guess we got about 1 minute left. Any advice on how not just real estate investors, but people looking to learn more, where do you plug in?
I think it's part of who I am. I love information and knowledge. So, I have a tremendous appetite. I'm a big fan of Twitter, on the information side. Not such a big fan of the trolling and the ugly stuff that happens, but definitely like being able to follow companies and bright individuals and NGOs and governments and stuff. It's kind of cool to have that accessibility to directly to people and knowledge. This is going to be a quality of the future, is those that are more informed, that are better able to critically think through change are going to be better positioned. And so, my recommendation would be you got to learn something new every day, and you got to figure out what your channels are to learn that. And you can't just try this out and rely on others and hope that you'll be okay. We all more and more control our own destiny, and you've got to take proactive steps. So it's about figuring out, what are the ways in which you can learn. I just have a massive appetite, and a big chunk of my day is reading and watching videos and talking to people and listening and absorbing more information to be able to better understand where things are, where they're going, and to challenge things, to ask the tough questions. And finally, I would just say, and this is why I'm even on this call with you today, is share. I mean, be somebody who helps others. And so I love to collaborate and share my knowledge, and it helps me learn, and it helps me keep current, and so those are a couple of points I would make.
I would completely agree. And, with YouTube and sites like LinkedIn Learning, and there's not really an excuse not to find time to learn it. A lot of it's free. So if they wanted to, touch base with you or connect with you online, how might they do that?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways you can reach me, which are quite easy. Definitely Twitter. It's at Reichental, just my last name, Reichental. So I'd recommend, follow me. Let's interact there. LinkedIn is one of my preferred channels too. So I think between Twitter and LinkedIn, I'm very accessible and would love to have a conversation or help anyone I can.
Well, and if you've got some time, highly recommend Foundations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I think it's one of 11 courses on the digital transformation leadership, which is quite interesting. So thank you so much for taking time to be on the show. The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under California DRE License 012-19911, Florida Mortgage Lender License 1577, and NMLS License 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the Hard Money tab.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.